Hello, everybody. This is Will Tagle, Dean of the Wisdom School of Ubiquity University, coming to you today on this global wisdom call. We have people from all over the world today, and as we're getting started, we want to invite you to participate in our chat today by hovering over your Zoom window, and your controls will appear, and you can go to the chat, usually at the bottom of the screen, and tell us in your chat box there the part of the planet Earth you're calling from. That will really help us begin to connect with each other. So already I can see Georgie's here from Hungary, and we have people from California and various places starting to come on. And go ahead and write and see Bob Meyer from San Francisco, and there's Jane Jack Morales from all the way over in Cypress Creek. And there's Ines Alonso from London. And there's Joanne from Toronto. Welcome, Joanne. And there's Victoria from Virginia. And we're really, there's Teresa from San Francisco. And there's Bob from Hawaii. So we're really enjoying the connections today. And we're going to be using these connections to explore syntropy. And I'll get to that in a moment. I don't know if Sheila got out the post, but I was thinking this morning in exploring syntropy, the sin of syntropy is our disconnection. So as we move in that direction, we're making connections today. So to begin today, I want to invite Judith to bring us together in a song.
Thank you, Will, and thank you all for putting up with my singing. It's what I love to do, and if I have a choice between a meditation and a song, I'll choose a song. So here's a song for us all. We are children of the angels, keepers of the fire. We are children of the angels, seeking for the light. We are not strangers, we're sisters and brothers. We know we came here to love each other, here in this circle of life. Aho.
Aho. Thank you, Judith. So I think we'll jump right in to our theme for today. And as I said, it has to do with syntropy and overcoming the illusion of disconnection and how we might explore that. Our presenter today is Jennifer Knight. Jennifer has a great background for our topic today. She has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and she has a law degree from the University of Texas, and she has a degree in psychology and psychotherapy as a practicing psychotherapist. So what I like to say with Jennifer is she's brought together a holy trinity of chemical engineering and the law and psychology. And also, Jennifer is an ongoing consultant in administration with the Wisdom School. So welcome, Jennifer. So always good to be with you.
Thank you, Will. It's really a pleasure to be with you today and everybody else, and to have this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects, syntropy.
Okay, off we go.
Okay, so today I'm thinking of syntropy as our pathway for conscious collaboration with nature, which has also been a subject near and dear to my heart for a very long time. So what is syntropy? First of all, it is the characteristic of living systems, and that is the key to understanding syntropy. The word comes from two Greek roots, as so many do, syn meaning converging or convergence, and tropos meaning tendency. So syntropy is the tendency to converge. Its complementary law is the law of entropy, which the scientists among you will be very familiar with. And it is made up, it is the tendency to diverge. So these are opposites, but I prefer to think of them, as many do, as complements, meaning they are both part of nature and of our science. But the syntropy side has been missing from classical science. So that's what we're going to explore today. Where did the idea of syntropy come from? There's several sources. One, it's really implied in one of the solutions to Einstein's fundamental equations of special relativity. But as we'll see, he kind of decided that the syntropy side should be ignored for a while. And in a flash of intuition, which is very syntropic, an Italian mathematician named Luigi Fontappier in 1941 realized there had to be, that the other solution to these fundamental equations are how living systems operate. And that came to him in kind of a flash of intuition. And then his work, we'll find, kind of fell in, he died in the 50s, mid-50s, as a relatively young man from my perspective. He was about 55. And his work fell down and kind of into oblivion. It went back into, let's say, the collective unconscious. And then it was, again, a flash of intuition in the 70s. And another Italian gentleman, a psychologist this time, or a psychologist to be, Ulysses de Corpo, had a flash of intuition that living systems operate according to a different set of laws than what we think of as classical science. And he developed his ideas and finally rediscovered syntropy. And his now wife, Antonella Benini, has been his partner in their work over the past 16 years. So I don't want to get heavily or deeply or bogged down into math, but I think it's important to know that the idea of syntropy is embedded in Einstein's famous equation. We think of it as E = mc squared, but that's actually a simplification. The original equation you'll see there is a squared equation, and I've defined the terms there. I won't go into detail, but the idea is that there are two solutions to that equation, because there can be a positive energy equation and a negative energy solution or equation. The positive energy solution corresponds to our conventional understanding of the forward, it's called the forward in time solution. That means energy that diverges from a source in the past over time, as time moves from past to present. In this model or solution, past causes create present effects, and that's what we're all used to as classical science. The negative energy solution corresponds to a backward in time solution, meaning energy converges from the present toward a source in the future. So as time moves from present to future, energy is converging. And those future sources are called future causes in this solution. So there are both past causes and future causes when we consider both solutions. Einstein, however, rejected the negative energy solution as impossible. In other words, the idea of future causes to him in the early 1900s seemed irrational, seemed unscientific, seemed like metaphysical, right? Which was not part of, quote, real science. So he just simplified this equation, which is kind of an engineering move. He dropped out the p squared c squared, saying, well, you know, the mass of a particle and its motion is very, very small because compared to the other factor, which is c to the fourth, the speed of light, which is obviously a huge number that dwarfs the other number for regular objects. So he decided we can just drop that one out, and then we can simplify it to E = mc squared, which does contain the profound idea that energy and matter are basically the same. So that was probably enough for everybody to digest at that time. But the backward in time or negative energy solution was therefore sort of cast aside for a few decades. And as I said earlier, in 1941, Luigi Fontappier, who was sort of a prodigy, a genius mathematician who went to the renowned School of Pisa in Italy, in 1941, right before Christmas, the story goes that he had an intuition that living systems operate according to the negative time solution of the fundamental equation that Einstein discovered, and that living systems converge toward future causes. In other words, the negative time solution governs life, living systems. So that idea is what he developed over the next 15 years before he died. Then my new friends, Ulysses de Corpo and Antonella Venini in Italy, after Fontappier's work died, or after he died, his work sort of disappeared. He had published a book, but it went out of print. And it was in 1977 that Ulysses de Corpo, another Italian psychologist, in a flash of intuition, he was about to enter university, and he realized that living systems, or life, operate according to different principles than classical science, than Newtonian physics as we think of them. And he was interested in the implications of these ideas for human consciousness. So he entered university to study psychology, but became frustrated that he was really doing experimental psychology that was very concrete, and they weren't very interested in his ideas of syntropy. He didn't know to even call it syntropy then. Eventually, he persevered, and one of his mentors knew about Fontappier's work and told him about it, and that's where he realized he had rediscovered syntropy, something that Fontappier had discovered in the early 40s. And then in 2001, and I think this is important because this is really what syntropy is all about, is relationship and connection and uniting both sides, opposites, masculine and feminine, for example. So his work really deepened and took off when he met Antonella Venini, his now wife, in 2001. And she was also interested in psychology, learned about syntropy, and then designed her master's and PhD work around an experiment to test syntropy, which if we have time, I'll talk about later. But she showed that in our heart, in very simple terms, our heart is our tuning fork for syntropy. The two were married, and they have explored and developed their ideas together, and they have two wonderful websites, which I've shown here on the slide. Syntropia.it is the Italian, but you can read it in English, and it has all of their books on it. And then syntropy.org has their journal with a lot of incredibly great articles. And here are two of the books that, for me, have been, sort of my, the sources of the information I'm presenting today in large part. And these are available on Amazon and through their website. So this looks complicated, but I just had to share this slide because it has some really, first of all, it was a gift to me from Ulysses de Corpo. And also it shows the implication here of there being two solutions to the fundamental energy equation. And that is the waves of energy from past causes and the waves of energy from future causes meet in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is a really cool idea, because that's where we're located, of course, in the present moment, and we're making choices. And our choices determine the future. So when we talk about future causes, we're not talking about what's called determinism. In other words, there's not just one future outcome. Our choices now align with multiple potential outcomes for the future. And so there's a paradox there. There are attractors or future causes, but there's also choice in the present. And this is sort of a summary of the differences or the complementary laws of syntropy and entropy. Entropy is called the forward in time solution. Some people call it retarded waves, but it's the classical science, the classical reality that we're used to, which is past causes create present effects, and time moves in one direction, from past to present to future. This describes energy and matter that diverge and tend towards homogeneous and random distributions, like the heat from a radiator that tends to spread out into the environment and dissipate. This solution demonstrates what's called the law of entropy, which is considered the fundamental law of classical science. The backward in time solution that we're talking about with syntropy, also called advanced waves, describes energy and matter that converge and tend toward the characteristics of living systems, which are increased differentiation and complexity, formation of structures rather than disintegration, and higher order. This solution demonstrates the law that Pentapia named the law of syntropy, which again governs living systems, and the biggest living system, well, I guess the universe is really the biggest living system, but our planet Gaia is a living system of which we are a part. Another key concept then is that energy that converges toward syntropy is about energy that converges toward future causes or attractors. And this was the idea I was talking about earlier. There's not just one outcome in the future, but there are a number of potential solutions, and those are called attractors. And those are things that we can align with and make choices to move toward. Into the next slide. Another implication of syntropy has to do with time. The idea that there are three different kinds of time, and actually the Greeks knew this. The old Greek philosophers, they call them chronos, kairos, and ion. In our language, chronos is the usual causal time where events flow or information flow from past to present. That's entropy, the idea of an expanding universe. Then there's what De Corpo calls retrocausal time, where the flow of time or events moves from future to present, characterized by syntropy or convergence, that we have a converging universe, not just an expanding universe. And where those two time waves meet is in the present moment. And that's called ion, which is, some people think of also as where the eternal fits in. So the present moment is when the diverging and converging flows or forces or flows of information interact with our choices. So that in the present, past, present, and future time coexist, and we are in touch with the eternal and with oneness. So again, this is another one of my friend Ulysses De Corpo's cool slides. And the point I want you guys to see here is this theory or this idea marries the particle wave duality. So we have the particle side of reality, and this is like, you probably are familiar with the idea that light has both a particle nature and a wave nature. The particle nature, De Corpo says, represents the past. So in other words, something that has happened in this reality. And the wave nature are the waves of future possibility or potentiality. So that's the wave nature of light or reality. And again, those two interact and meet in the present moment. I just want to, I am a devotee of Carl Jung. I've been studying his depth psychology for a long time. And so one of the things that really struck me when I discovered syntropy a couple years ago through De Corpo and Benini's work is this is what Carl Jung was talking about when he wrote about and coined the term synchronicity. It is, in fact, the same thing. And he described it as meaningful synchronicities as meaningful coincidences. In other words, events that happen that are meaningful to the observer. Well, who's the observer? That requires a human being, a human consciousness. So the human observer finds meaning in events that are not linked by traditional cause and effect. That's what a meaningful coincidence is. And Jung called it, synchronicities appear to arise from acausal orderedness. I think that was his word for syntropy. I also have discovered in my current research that Jung's idea for synchronicity really came out of his lifelong correspondence with Wolfgang Pauli, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist, who also became one of Jung's clients and started learning physics from his dreams. That's where he developed his physics, and his metaphysics over his lifetime was from tracking his dreams. And they had these incredible letters back and forth over their lives. Both came to believe that psyche, which I believe is just another word for consciousness, and nature share a unity of essence. And I believe that unity of essence is syntropy. Water is another important feature here. So, we all know, all spiritual traditions say that water is the source of life. In fact, Wolfgang Pauli made a huge discovery that hydrogen bonds, which are what hold water molecules together, they share, in his words, an intermediate position between the quantum level and the macro level. De Corpo and Vanini say that this hydrogen bridge, these special bonds, are where syntropy moves from the level of quantum to macro. So in other words, we gather syntropy from taking in water. And of course, our bodies are some 70 to 90% water, depending on our age. That's what I understand. So water truly is the source of life. And I'm also aware of some research out there that water is a transmitter of information. So again, that's another idea from syntropy, is that information converges, according to these attractors, these future causes, into higher levels of complexity, order, integration, and wholeness. So all of these ideas, it's like once you get this idea of syntropy, everything starts fitting together. At least that's been my experience. And here's that idea of information. So living systems, as we know, they're open, they interact with the environment around them, and they acquire and exchange information. So if we want to align with syntropy, how do we tune in? How do we do it? I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but I just wanted to give credit here for, this is the foundation of what I'm going to talk about, that our hearts are the way that we tune into syntropy. And it's the experiment that Antonella Vanini designed and worked on in her master's and dissertation, and it's described in their books in a lot of detail. To survive, life must always reduce entropy and increase syntropy. So from this idea, De Corpo derived his theory of vital needs. So we're familiar with our material needs for food, water, air, shelter, and hygiene. But we also, we humans, we have a need for meaning and a need for love and cohesion or connection. And his idea is that those needs are just as vital as our needs for food, water, air, shelter. Related to this is the idea that when we feel cohesion and love and connection, those are felt in our body, in our heart center, as what we call love. It's a feeling of warmth and well-being. And their experiments showed that our autonomic nervous system, which of course regulates our heartbeat and our breath, is actually attuned to syntropy. So in other words, our heart and our bodies respond to future causes before our minds do, before our conscious minds do. And if we can pay attention to where our heart draws us, that's our clue that we're following syntropy, that we're in alignment with love. And this is not love like romantic love, that is an aspect, but love is the intelligence of the universe. So our inner guidance is right there in our heart. And of course, indigenous people teach this, that we need to drop down from our heads to our hearts and think with our hearts. That's the way forward. That's the way to transform our world into one that works for everybody. And syntropy completely explains why that's true, at least the way I understand it. So Will, I think I can stop there if you want to dialogue for a while.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I know you've got a wealth of material, and Jennifer will be one of the key persons in shaping the courses we'll be offering in 2018, and we'll likely do one on syntropy in some facet or another, so we can follow up on this. So yeah, let's rather than my responding at this point, let's see if since I can see Georgie, if you respond with what you've heard thus far.
Oh, well, thanks. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Jennifer, so much for your presentation. It was really interesting, and I know that within 20 minutes to convey such complex and yet simple theory is not very easy, but you've done a fantastic job. I actually have a few questions because I really would like to understand more the profundity of syntropy. And I try to reach into other traditions' understanding of this, even though they didn't use such terminology, like Taoism, the yin and yang. And that's that the balance is the converging and the diverging energies. So if you say that the entropy and the syntropy, they are in balance, if syntropy was taking greater part of this coherence, would life could be sustained longer, i.e. that entropy wouldn't lead to death?
Well, that's a great question. So I would say in the near term, we need to shift the balance more towards syntropy in order to sustain life on this planet. I think that we have been too far aligned with entropy and not aware of or even paying any attention to the reality of syntropy. And so that's why we're seeing such disintegration and destruction of the living systems on the planet. So in the near term, we need to align with syntropy to rebalance, which, you know, Gaia will do one way or the other. But if we want to be working with her in that rebalancing, then aligning through our hearts with syntropy is the way. In the long term, you know, what happens in terms of the balance in sort of a cosmic sense? Some people believe that the universe, though it may still be expanding at this point, will eventually start converging, and that's part of a huge cycle, and that the convergence will converge and converge and converge, and perhaps we'll even go through a black hole moment, and then we'll be reborn with another big bang. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So it is a dance of the opposites, and the yin and yang, the Tao, that's a perfect analogy for what we're talking about. So we're not saying entropy is bad or wrong. We know that in nature, entropy is part of nature's cycles, and nature moves in cycles and spirals. But De Corpo and Benini's sort of big insight is that life requires that a tipping point towards syntropy, at least as we know it now on the planet. We need to have a little bit more syntropy than entropy to keep life going.
And would you also agree that entropy is equivalent with fear, rage, negative energies that actually leads more to destruction, whereas syntropy is more what you explained, the heartfelt, the love, the kindness and everything, and that's what we need to bring into more in cohesion with entropy. I have two more questions, and I will give the airspace to others.
Let me say one thing about that, because that's really important. So the opposite side of when we can detect syntropy, when we have feelings of love and well-being in our heart, warmth, connection, those feelings you talked about, so anxiety, emptiness, fear, rage, those states are associated with entropy.
Yeah.
So that's a very important point. Our feelings are our information system for how to navigate this.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I understood as well. So where does consciousness comes into the whole equation? Is syntropy consciousness, or is consciousness a guiding principle to make entropy and syntropy coherent, or what is your understanding?
Well, that's a big question. I don't claim to have the answer to what is consciousness exactly. But one way to look at it would be that consciousness, I'm thinking of it as an aspect of, well, let's think of consciousness as the whole, as wholeness. So there can be consciousness aligned with entropy. There can be consciousness aligned with syntropy. And we move back and forth, right? We could think of consciousness as the Tao, perhaps. And so there's going to be yin and yang, there's going to be entropy, and syntropy, there's going to be destruction and creation. It's a flow, it's a totality. But what frequency of consciousness we align with on an ongoing basis determines our choices in the present, which determines where we're going. What future are we co-creating?
So, thank you. Sorry, may I have just one more very important question? I will mute. Is that you said that there is no such thing as determinism and no such thing as creator in the whole understanding, because that would be a past entity. So then what is the purpose or the meaning of the evolution of these two different arrows of time?
Okay, so I didn't mean to say that determinism doesn't exist. What I meant to address is, I've had the question before when I present syntropy, people saying, well, are you saying that everything's already predetermined and it doesn't matter what we choose? What about human free will? Okay, so I was just addressing that to say that, as I understand it, the future causes are waves of probability. They are perhaps nodes of convergence in the field, but there's not just one, other than in some very superlative way that we can't probably understand. You know, in the cosmic eventual convergence to the black hole, maybe there's one, but we're nowhere near that. So in terms of our lifetimes and the generations to come, there are many future attractors that we can align with. There's not just one. So our free will and our choice matters.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Georgie, talking to us from Budapest. Let's talk for just a moment. I want to go to the chat, and someone mentioned that your comments, Julie Walker mentioned that you were connecting with the heart brain. And we know that from recent research that there are something over 100,000 neural cells in the heart per se. And then this is staggering from Columbia University research recently, that there may be 100 million neural cells in the intestines. So we go from, and I know this is a point made in the book that you mentioned, that the center of the intuitive syntropic side of ourselves is not just the physical heart, but this whole system from our solar plexus up through our heart, which may include the intestinal area and digestive areas as well. So
Yes.
now just your comments about that, Jennifer.
Well, I think that's a very important point. We really have three brains: the gut, the heart, and the physical brain in our head. And my understanding is that the heart brain is sort of the master that really sends most of the information up to our thinking brain. But the gut has extremely important information, and you know, a lot of our feelings and our intuition comes through the gut. We have to discern, however, because our gut can also, you know, it's really, I think, more attuned to our survival and to the lower brainstem. And so it can get into fight or flight, and it can be respond to events in the present as if they were, because of their similarity to past events that were frightening, scary, risky. And so we have to discern, is our gut feeling coming from a place of fear that is based on past conditioning, or is it coming from, you know, the present, our body's response to a present outer stimuli? And I think that requires some discernment, and I think tuning in with a compassionate heart toward the gut like a friend and trying to sort out where is this coming from is sort of the way. So I think of the heart as sort of the master or the observer that can help us discern where's our gut feeling coming from, and do we need to follow it? And of course, in an emergency, you follow your gut feeling, right? You just do it because that's what you need to do to survive. And that's some of the value of our gut brain, I think.
Yeah, and Karen Frank has asked the question, how have you connected your explorations with heart math? You just...
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have. I knew about heart math before I knew about syntropy. And in fact, that was how I discovered syntropy, was through heart math and the pair studies. And so, yes, and so coherence, those of you who are familiar with heart math, coherence is, of course, getting our three brains in alignment. And that's can be done very quickly through focusing on the heart, thinking of something or someone you love or have gratitude for, and then just putting yourself in a state of gratitude. Your body will move into coherence. So that is absolutely aligned with what we're talking about here today.
Good. And then Catherine Connor raises an interesting question in the chat box about the philosopher Charles Hartshorne, who, by the way, was at Emory University when I was there, far enough back that I don't really want to reference it at this point. But at any rate, Hartshorne really is building his work on another word from the mathematician philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. And Alfred North Whitehead had an interesting term for syntropy, which I don't think he knew about syntropy, but the word he used for that was concrescence, which was a word that he made up. And it's a beautiful word, because he had the notion of what he made up another word for how we grasp reality, and he called it prehension. And that's another word that he created. So for him, concrescence was a bringing together past, present, into a moment that he called an actual occasion.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so in some sense, we're being pulled toward that moment in our own lives, perhaps today as we're listening to you, where we have moments of bringing together syntropy, or concrescence, as he put it. And I always thought about prehension as this connecting, this moment when we as humans realize, if only in a fleeting way, that separateness is an illusion, and that our connection is deeply, deeply felt. And as it's felt, then the past and the present converge in our bodies and in our minds. So I'll just pause there. Jennifer, you were nodding. What kind of a response were you having to that?
Well, I think that, first of all, very beautiful, what you just said, very beautifully stated. I think I had kind of an aha moment when you talked about concrescence, as there's this sort of convergence into an actual occasion.
Yes.
And that makes me think of, in syntropy, that's where the past waves and the future waves of time come together in the present, and our choices cause a particular event to manifest, as one way of thinking of it. Carl Jung talked about that in terms of synchronicity, as synchronicities being the creation of a moment in time. So in other words, it's the idea that there's this wave of potentiality of events out there coming to us from the future. There's what's already happened in the past. And somehow we're creators of events by what we choose. And I think that's a really beautiful idea. In other words, that's how we are co-creating with nature, with the divine forces, however we think about the mystery, through our choices in the present. And this idea of an actual occasion through concrescence, I think we're trying to get at an understanding, a felt experience of that numinous moment when we make a choice and then something gets created.
Right. And
I think that gives purpose and meaning.
yeah.
Here.
So let's see if we can take another run at getting HeatherAsh in.
Okay.
HeatherAsh, are you there?
I am. Yay!
Good. So your response thus far?
I am so loving this. I've been tapping in and out because I'm in the middle of another workshop, and just like jumping up and down over here. And just from the conversation just now, what came up for me is just this recognition that we're piecing words together for something that obviously has no words, and that it's important that we get the languaging and the structure, super important that we get refocused, because just even having this word syntropy to rewire how we've been in relationship, because we've so deeply learned about entropy, and to come back to this, like, right, there's something much larger, and that to recognize that it's only in the last 500 years that we've gotten off track. Like all of our ancestors, the shamans that are in our blood, in our ancestry, lived these principles. And if any of us went and talked to any of the elders from the past, they'd be like, well, yeah, duh, of course, that's the way the world works. And we're like, wow, we've just discovered something new. And to realize we haven't discovered anything, we're just remembering what the truth is and coming back into balance in a new way. So thanks so much, Jennifer, for bringing this forward. It's just been a beautiful, beautiful conversation, and I'm sure it's lighting a lot of people up as much as it is me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, HeatherAsh.
Yeah, thank you, HeatherAsh. And I just want to say that something syntropic is happening right now, and that we have people joining our call as viewers, and also through phone call-in listeners. So as we're talking, there's some kind of attractor force going on where people are joining as we're talking, which is kind of unusual for this.
Which is, yeah, I don't know if that's ever happened. I was just noticing that I'm like, wait a minute, the numbers are going up. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to echo what HeatherAsh just said, because I think I totally agree that this is a process of remembering and reconnecting with ancient wisdom. So that's, another idea that I really embrace, is that, we are not the pinnacle of human civilization right now. It's not like, none of this stuff has ever been known before and we're the first people. No, we are remembering, we're waking up. And I think that's why this information resonates so, and starts to make things come together and make sense in a way that maybe we've been searching for, because we've been walking around with amnesia. And now we're finally getting enough consciousness of awakening to the old ancient wisdom that is completely aligned with Earth and completely aligned with syntropy, and knows exactly what to do.
Yeah. So along that line, we have a comment from Allison Jensen over in Houston, who says, this sounds like a vision quest to me. And in that sense, tying in with what you just said, Jennifer, there are these moments, if we move ourselves out of the patterns of ordinary life, which is what ancient wilderness quests were and still are, then we have that lack of enmeshment, because, as you know, as a therapist, enmeshment is different from integration.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
So I'll just pause there. You're shaking your head, so maybe you'd comment on that.
Yes, that's a really great point. So, enmeshment we can think of as being unconscious of our connections, let's say. And you know, we think of maybe chaos as a way that everything can be present, but there's no order or complexity or integration in that. There's no conscious understanding and linkage in that. So I think part of syntropy, and going back to Georgie's point earlier, how does consciousness fit into all of this? As we become more conscious of the different parts of ourselves, of the different parts of the world, of how things connect, then you get integration, then you get relationship. When we're unconscious, you have enmeshment. And enmeshment can be driven by fear, for example, but it's unconscious, and we could say the opposite or a complement to integration. So to go from enmeshment to integration, there often has to be a sorting and a conscious seeing of distinctions before you can make the integrative and reconnective move. So we've done a really great job with our science over the past 500 years or so of separating and distinguishing and being in silos. Now we need to integrate all of that back into a whole.
Right, and as a therapist, I know in many ways you can say most of what we call disorders are from two directions. I want to see what you think about this. One direction is that we are so enmeshed in our unconscious practice of our lives in relationships that we're not individuals. That's the reason Jung spoke of his psychology as the psychology of individuation. Isn't that an interesting thing? That he who gave us synchronicity and the collective unconscious called his psychology the psychology of the individual. That puzzled me for a long time. Then I began to realize that he was talking about you have to achieve your own individuality and identity in order to let go and reconnect through syntropic events. So I'll let you comment on that.
Well, I think that's, you know, Jung he really decried what he called mass consciousness. In other words, you know, we could think of it as mass mind, or, you know, going with unconsciously following waves of fear and entropy is one way of thinking about that in our language we're using today. And being in relationships where you're afraid to be separate, where you're afraid to have your own feelings and thoughts, where you're afraid of rejection. You know, that's enmeshment. So yes, in order to be able to have a healthy relationship with yourself, with others, with the earth, you have to be able to claim your own ground. And so that's where the ego is actually important, because that gives us a container for consciousness from which we can relate to everything else. So again, I think of integration as nothing being left out. You know, everything, as much as possible, we bring things into consciousness. And of course, we can never bring everything to consciousness. And that was one thing Jung understood. The collective unconscious is infinite. But we are always a work in progress. And we're striving to bring more things into our conscious realm of relationship. And that's what syntropy helps us do.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going back to the chat box, and we have a comment from the poet Carol Flake that Teilhard's vision of the new sphere is everything that rises must converge. And then that brings to my mind the omega point, which is the scientific speculation by Teilhard that everything in the universe is fated, listen, that's his word, is fated to spiral toward the point of divine unification.
Yes. Well, you know, that to me, first of all, Teilhard de Chardin is credited by De Corpo and Vanini as being another discoverer of syntropy. So he's recognized as being a syntropic philosopher, let's say. But also I see in Jung's idea of the self with a capital S as being like our future attractor, our totality, our most whole, the most whole that we can be is like what is drawing us. it has a direction of wholeness and integration that's always just out of reach, but always drawing us forward. And I think that might be what Teilhard is getting to when he's talking about fate. And that happens, you know, we know from complex systems theory that everything is nested systems. So at every level, it's the same. So just like we have a self with a capital S that is drawing us to our greatest totality, we are nested in the system of Gaia, the system of the universe that has its own omega point, right? And all of those necessarily have to be able to be integrated together. So if we're aligning with our self-direction, capital S, we're also aligning with this omega point, with the fate of the universe as guided by the intelligence of love.
Beautiful. So I want to go back to Budapest because I can see Georgie smiling. So when you bring up this question of complex systems, that's right in your bailiwick. So you're
no, yeah, absolutely. It was really wonderful listening to your discussion. But 2 points I would like to make. One of which is we seemingly react negatively to the notion of chaos. I think, as we know from Ilya Prigozhin's work, that chaos is a necessary stage of evolution and progress, because evolution and progress is not a linear notion. So it may sound to us as an entropic force, but it is just as necessary as syntropy. That's my understanding is. And also, while you were talking, I was thinking about the state of meditation. Once you are so much in that altered state of consciousness, then there is no time. There is no such thing as the arrow of time this way or that way, isn't it? So when we are talking about entropy and syntropy, we must also talk about dimensions, yeah? Mm-hmm. So I think that's another good discussion point. I'm not sure if we have time for that, but I would like to just ask your opinion on this point.
Okay, so on the idea of dimensions, so that is such a deep topic, and I first want to really agree with you on the idea that chaos is not a negative thing. I think we fear chaos, but it is absolutely the part of life, and it is a part of creativity, and we have to learn to sit with it until the new thing emerges. So I completely align with you there. In terms of dimensions, you know, I believe there are many dimensions of which we are just beginning to get glimmers. And so, you know, the 3 dimensions we're familiar with, the 4th dimension of time is only the beginning. And some people think of the 5th dimension as being the dimension of the heart that we are moving into. So that's as far as I'll try to go today. But I do think we live in a multi-dimensional universe of which we only have we only know a part of with our current consciousness.
Absolutely. And I think the most wonderful thing is that how little we know, because this is the whole point, the discovery of life, our own life and collective life. So I'm absolutely content with not knowing too much.
Yes.
Yeah, good. What a beautiful discussion. I notice also on the chat box that we have Pablo from Brazil who's made a comment. So this is an actual occasion for me when we feel the different aspects of Gaia coming together from Budapest and Brazil and so on, and from that strange and wonderful, but again, strange country called Texas.
It's another planet.
Yeah. So then let's talk for just a moment about bringing together in a syntropic moment what you'd like to leave with people for today, Jennifer.
Well, I think what I'd like to leave people with today, this is kind of where my current, my most recent aha moment came, so I want to share it.
Good.
So one of the things that I think syntropy reawakens us to is the wisdom of alchemy. And the axiom of Maria from alchemy is that the one becomes the two becomes the three becomes the four, which becomes the one again. Okay. And so what I just learned from reading about Wolfgang Pauli, the physicist who was the colleague of Jung, is that he was really trying to puzzle out, well, all right, there's psyche, spirit, and matter. There's a trinity. There's a three-part, three dimensions of our reality. What's the fourth? What's the fourth thing that ties it all together, that converts it back into its unity, but at a higher level of complexity and order, or a higher level of consciousness? And what he came to was that it was connection and relationship, what he called eros. Eros is also love. Eros is also syntropy. Eros is also the feminine. So, or maybe the masculine and feminine joined in relationship is a better way to think of eros. So I think of syntropy as not only the fourth, but also the unifier, the thing, the water that connects everything, the matrix in which we live and move and have our being is love. And I think that's a beautiful idea. It gives me hope. And I hope that it engenders hope in all of you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. What a great smile. Yeah. So let's talk about several different outgrowths of our conversation today. One is that on April the 11th, I'm going to be talking about the confluence or the syntropy of ancient wisdom as given to us through a mosaic of visions that reach back through the millennia, through the Hopi prophecies and other Native American prophecies. And Sheila will put on the chat box how you can link to that. And I want to say that much of what you said today is another way of talking about their movement from the fourth civilization to the fifth civilization. So we're moving actually from one dimension to another. Then another thing I want to say is that we want to invite you back for next month. And we'll have a council of wise women, Judith and Jennifer and HeatherAsh. Georgie's going to be celebrating Mother's Day, or she would be here. Maybe some others of you. Under the umbrella and topic of, listen closely now, beauty and the fake beast. And the subtitle of our discussion next month will be In Search of the Wild Heart and the Divine Feminine. So we'll see as various ones of us. And I'd like to suggest those of you in the USA, and I think maybe other parts of the world as well, there's an interesting little movie out called Beauty and the Beast, built on that archetypal story. There's a lot of singing in it. I took a little nap during part of it, but I really it really stimulated me to think about the syntropy of the Beauty and the Beast. So we'll be talking about that next month. I invited Matthew Mittendorf, something in our Earth Tribe gatherings and also in these gatherings, because I sense we have a sort of a convergence, a concrescence of communities from around the world. And the arts, transformative art, has always been an important part of the wisdom school. And so from time to time, I want to have creative expressions that come as a way of opening our intuitive side. Say something about what you're about to do, and we'll bring everybody into it.
Well, I was thinking that since we've had such a sublime talk, it's time to get ridiculous. And then I was noticing that Jennifer talked about chaos and creativity being connected. So, and you ask, what would I call this? I call it a rap. So,
Okay, good.
so here we go. Jesus and Lincoln went to Washington to lobby for equality, truth, and love, not just for one species, but for all. And that's why they gave the famous Sermon on the Mall. Sermon on the Mall, Sermon on the Mall. That's why they gave the famous Sermon on the Mall. Well, it's a fine little sermon, and it goes like this. What happens to a parasite that kills its host? Who are the people that you love the most? Isn't love the best, most entertaining? So hold them close now, because love's worth saving. Yeah, hold them close now, because love's worth saving. Why did we move into this techno bubble? Why did we cut off our roots? That's trouble. How did the wind blow us off course? And why did the humans file for divorce? Yeah, why did the humans file for divorce? Don't all those galaxies make you feel humble? Our biotelescopes can hear the background rumble. So many billions of stars in the sky. We're thinking about how and we're wondering why. Oh, we're thinking about how and we're wondering why. Who's gonna sing up the morning sun? Who's gonna dance till the daylight comes? It may not be science, but it makes big love. And didn't someone say that love is number one? Yeah, didn't someone say that love is number one? So how come Santa Claus is dressed in black? How come the children want a carbon tax? Can Santa fly without reindeer? No, and that's why the reindeer need the right to vote, yeah? That's why the reindeer need the right to vote. And let's give polar bears their own Senate seat. Let them have the floor and freely speak. Hey, Senator, will you change your vote if you are staring down a polar bear throat? Imagine that. A polar bear throat. Shall we throw a wake for the polar ice cap? When it melts, you know, all the oceans will get fat. We may be big and we may be bad. Just don't be in the way when the earth gets mad. Yeah, don't be in the way when the earth gets mad. A time machine took us to 2044. 500 million people up on death row. They loved economic growth and drill, baby, drill. They's convicted of having their grandchildren killed. They's convicted of having their grandchildren killed. Yes, Jesus and Lincoln went to Washington to lobby for equality, truth, and love, not for just one species, but for all. And that's why they gave the famous Sermon on the Mall. Sermon on the Mall, Sermon on the Mall. That's why they gave the famous Sermon on the Mall. So let's raise a glass and make a toast to all the people we love the most. Bid them adieu, soon we'll all be a ghost. What happens to a parasite that kills its host? What happens to a parasite that kills its host?
Thank you so much, Matthew. So we'll be having that and poetry and so on from time to time. And thank you again, Jennifer, and thank you, Georgie. Thank you, HeatherAsh. Thank you, Judith. You have any closing comments?
Oh, I just love this. That's my closing comment.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. Yeah. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay. See you on April 11th and also the first Saturday in May for our Global Wisdom Call.
Oh.